Hey there lads, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and to say I've had a busy weekend might just be an understatement. I recently got back into practice for American football, so I've been at that for around about 14 hours this weekend. So in between getting absolutely pummeled into the dirt and then completing as much as I can of the Call of Duty beta, it's safe to say I haven't had a lot of free time. But here we are, I got loads of footage, and today I want to talk to you about Call of Duty's Realism mode, which also not only begs some questions about the direction of the game, but is actually just a standout, pretty sick mode as far as things go. So why does this pose a problem? Not the Realism mode and the playlist itself, but why does the existence of this playlist perhaps cause some issues? Well, to start with, I think it's the way that Call of Duty has been marketed. Call of Duty has very much been marketed as a reformed game, a new franchise that's taking steps towards becoming a realistic shooter, and I think you can see in a lot of the trailers, a lot of the marketing material, the expectation is that this is supposed to be somewhat closer to games like Battlefield, Insurgency, and other FPS games, which have kind of grown up over the years. I think a lot of them have gotten much more challenging, and a lot of them have decided they're going to do away with some of the gimmicks of the past and really focus on a realistic experience to the best of their ability and really deliver a modern shooter or a modern variant of shooter that I think a lot of people are quite happy with. You know, games that I would loop into this category would be like Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Rainbow Six Siege, Insurgency, maybe even things like Squad, but of course we're talking much grander scale in that sense. But I think the idea of that whole marketing push was to very much widely appeal to a much larger audience. Changes of the game also mimic this. We have things like peeking door animations, we have the reduction of a minimap so there's no longer red dots, we have the introduction of a compass, we have full customization, as well as an entire ballistic system in the game. So suddenly there's a new Call of Duty on the scene where it's perhaps pushing towards a new direction. But in comes Reddit, and in comes the Twitter and social media handles of players who I think are too heavily entrenched in Call of Duty to really understand why these kind of changes are good for the franchise and why these changes are good for introducing new people to the game, but more importantly, why these changes are bringing back veterans. Now, this ongoing onslaught of crowd of probably like, I don't know, an under 20 age bracket or very strongly young age bracket have probably played Call of Duty so much they simply cannot let go of the minimap in any shape or form, or just have so many issues with the game design because they don't understand that that's what other shooters are already doing or what other shooters are already at. Now, if you've only played things like Black Ops and other Call of Duties prior to this and done more or less nothing else on the shooter scene, then you simply would struggle in any other franchise. And I think this shows quite heavily. Say, for example, people who played a lot of Black Ops 4. Fast-paced, jumpy around, pick 10 system, and a lot of people didn't use things like tactical grenades and flashbangs and stun grenades, and it shows very heavily, I'd actually say, in the new beta, because I've seen so many people complain about dying and stuff once I've wrecked them on the feed, and these are the same kind of people that aren't checking corners, that aren't throwing flashbangs, that aren't using grenades and abilities in hardcore parkour and sneak positions to the best of their ability. Now, that's not to say that I'm some elite MLG pro that plans on absolutely ruling the world, but I think it's safe to say that players of different franchises are actually doing exceptionally better at this Call of Duty than they have before. Players who play Siege, players who play Insurgency, players who play Battlefield, I think in general the sentiment is that this has been a great beta, and a lot of us are excited for what the game has to offer. But if you're a Call of Duty franchise person who doesn't really do much else, then this is a departure from that. And the reason this realism mode causes a problem, I feel, is because it represents the split that this game has. Half of it wants to be this really solid tactical shooter that's a bit more slow pace. The other half of it wants to be a traditional fast-paced jump-around Call of Duty game. And I think if you play base game modes like Headquarters, you kind of get the half-and-half experience where it's like, yeah, this is a Call of Duty, but also it's actually quite a bit different, and I think that's where the game really thrives. But if you play something like Tactical Realism or the Realism playlists or the Night Vision playlists, I must say, it's almost like playing a different game. If you take away the callouts for things like UAVs and stuff, and maybe reduce the kind of killstreak impact, it feels as though you're playing a game which very easily couldn't be Call of Duty. It still features a lot of what the franchise does and what it does well, but at the same time, just looking at this, I would be like, whoa, this kind of looks and feels a bit closer to Insurgency Sandstorm. I have to say, after playing the Realism playset, which does no adjustment to damages, but only does things like removing the HUD, I actually really enjoyed it. But I also do really enjoy the base playlist. I just kind of wish it had less HUD elements that were constantly spamming your face and spamming your audio. But beyond that, ultimately I feel as though this is the split and divide that the Tactical Realism playlist suggests. That there is half a playlist and half a set of players who are very much interested in this new dynamic of Call of Duty, and there's another half that want Call of Duty to go back to the ways of old. So what would my suggestion be to the developers of this? The developers that have had to listen to bring minimap back every 5 seconds on Twitter for the past week? Well, honestly, I would just do nothing. I would stick to your guns and stay with what you know. I think minus changing a few HUD elements on the base mode where things are a little less spammy and a little less in your face, and maybe slightly dropping the size of the compass, I really do feel as though Call of Duty is in a really good spot this year. I think the gunplay's been punchy, there's a few netcode issues, but beyond that, everything has been a really solid experience. And I wouldn't actually change the base game too heavily from what they have now. Now, I like the introduction of the minimap to not show red dots, but at least be there. I can appreciate that. But if they can find any other ingenuitive ways of showing where teammates are without necessarily having that minimap in the top of the corner, or at least having the minimap somewhat scalable and perhaps with different shapes, I think that would be a really great option. Ultimately, I just feel as though the hand-holding feature of chasing red dots shouldn't be in the game, it shouldn't be in the franchise, and truth be told, if you want people to come back to Call of Duty, it shouldn't be there, because most of us got sick of the game because that's all it was. It was chasing red dots, getting shotgunned or SMG'd, rinse, repeat, die, kind of use a kill streak, best of luck, see you later. But this is a very different experience, and I think it's something that appeals to a much wider audience, and whilst I'm sure it neglects a few of the traditional Call of Duty players, ultimately, just get good, get better at it, change your meta, change how you play. This isn't because, you know, this isn't some kind of hostile takeover shit, you know, this isn't some mad stuff right here. What this really is about is that Call of Duty as a franchise will continue to struggle so long as it's known as the sort of, you know, smash and dash, die quickly shooter that it has been in the past. And I think it's shown very recently. Black Ops 4 sales numbers were a little bit better than World War II. World War II is terrible. Games like Ghost tanked completely. There are so many Call of Duties over the past few years that I can talk to that would say, this is declining your player base. This is declining your player base. This doesn't appeal to FPS players. And whilst I'm not saying that Call of Duty should lose its identity for what it does well in terms of competitive shooting and really good gunplay and high intensity moments, I must say some of the Headquarters and Cyber Attack games that I've played have been great in that respect. What I really do think it needs to do is kind of stay away from this sort of stigma that the game has, this sort of only 13-year-olds play this game and they just spawn, die, spawn, die, spawn, die, because that's what Call of Duty has been in the past. And I think for once, minus a few spawn changes and a few things with a HUD and a few netcode things, they are so close to getting to a great formula that's going to represent a really good shift for the franchise in a very positive direction. So folks, that's it from me today, TheTacticalBrit. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. How do you feel about Call of Duty's changes? Or do you not like the changes? Or are you just not a big fan at all? Let me know what you're feeling and thinking in the comment section below. As always lads, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in another video.